Eleanor Grayson lay in the sterile hospital bed, the beep of machines a cruel metronome to her fading hope. At 68, her body was frail, ravaged by the cancer that had crept into her bones like an uninvited guest. Her silver hair, once thick and lustrous, now clung thinly to her scalp, a reminder of the chemotherapy's relentless toll. Yet her eyes, sharp and gray as storm clouds, still burned with a fierce will to live. She had built a life of grit and Gracie a real estate empire worth millions. A legacy she intended for her 3 children, Marcus, Lila, and Thomas. But as she lay there, tethered to 4 drips, she overheard a conversation that would shatter her world. "They're saying she won't make it past 6 months," Marcus whispered, his voice low but clear through the thin hospital curtain. He was the eldest, 42, always pragmatic, his suits as crisp as his ambition. "We need to act now. The estate's too big to leave to chance." Lila's voice followed, softer but laced with urgency. "I've already spoken to the lawyer. We can divide the properties and liquidate the smaller assets. The trust funds are secure, but we should move them to our names before, you know." At 38, Lila had her mother's charm, but none of her warmth. Her beauty a polished veneer over calculated intent. Thomas, the youngest at 35, hesitated. "This feels wrong. She's still here." His voice trembled, the artist in him always softer, more sentimental. But Marcus cut him off. "Sentiment won't pay for your studio, Tom, or Lila's gallery, or my expansion plans. She'd want us to be practical. We're just preparing." Eleanor's heart clenched, not from the cancer, but from the betrayal slicing through her. Her children, her pride, were carving up her legacy like vultures circling a still-breathing body. She wanted to scream, to storm out and confront them. But her body betrayed her, too weak to move. Instead, she lay still, tears pooling in her eyes, as their words burned into her memory. The weeks that followed were a blur of pain and revelation. Eleanor's condition worsened, her body a battlefield of fevers and fatigue. Yet her mind remained sharp, replaying their conversation like a broken record. She had raised them alone after their father's death, pouring every ounce of her strength into their futures. Marcus, the driven businessman. Lila, the aspiring art curator. Thomas, the dreamer with paint-stained hands. They were her world. She had set up trust funds for each, generous sums to ensure their dreams, believing they shared her values of loyalty and love. How had it come to this? One gray morning, Dr. Patel entered her room with a cautious smile. "Eleanor, we've got your latest scans. There's something remarkable." Her heart skipped. "The tumors, they're shrinking. It's not a cure, but it's progress. We're going to try a new treatment. There's a real chance you could recover." Hope, fragile as a sparrow's wing, fluttered in her chest. She clung to it, even as her children's betrayal gnawed at her. She didn't tell them about the new prognosis. Instead, she watched them. Marcus visited less, always on his phone, discussing deals. Lila brought flowers but spoke in platitudes, her eyes darting to her watch. Only Thomas lingered, sketching in his notebook, his guilt palpable. Eleanor began to see them for who they were, not her children, but strangers wearing their faces. As her strength returned, so did her resolve. She called her lawyer, Margaret, a woman as fierce as Eleanor herself. "I want to know everything," Eleanor demanded, her voice steady despite her frail frame. "What have they done with my estate?" Margaret's face darkened. "They've been busy. Marcus has transferred 2 of your commercial properties into his company's name. Lila's liquidated some stocks for her gallery. Thomas. He's resisted, but he hasn't stopped them. Eleanor's hands trembled, not with weakness, but with rage. And the trust funds? Still intact. But they filed paperwork to redirect the disbursements to themselves upon your passing. The word passing hung in the air like a guillotine. Eleanor closed her eyes, picturing the years she'd spent building her empire nights without sleep. Deals won through sheer will. All for them. She had taught them to be strong. But not like this. Not to betray her while she still breathed. I want it all undone, she said finally, her voice cold as steel. Every transfer. Every signature. And the trust funds. I want them erased. Margaret hesitated. Eleanor, that's drastic. You've always wanted them secure. They stopped being my children the moment they divided my life like it was theirs to take. Eleanor replied. Do it. The legal process was slow, but Eleanor was patient. She endured more treatments, her body fighting as fiercely as her spirit. By spring, she was walking again, her hair growing back in soft, silver wisps. Her children noticed her recovery, their visits tinged with unease. Marcus spoke of misunderstandings. Lila offered tearful apologies. Thomas just sat silently, his eyes pleading. Eleanor smiled, said little, and let them squirm. She moved back into her sprawling estate, a mansion overlooking the Pacific, its walls lined with memories of better days. She invited her children for dinner, a rare event. They arrived, polished and nervous, expecting a frail mother. Instead, they found Eleanor at the head of the table, regal and unyielding, her gray eyes cutting through their facades. I know what you did, she began, her voice steady. You thought I was dying, so you divided my life like a pie. You took my properties, my stocks, my trust funds. You took my trust. Marcus opened his mouth, but Eleanor raised a hand. Don't. I'm not here to hear excuses. I'm here to tell you I'm alive. And I've undone it all. The properties are back in my name. The stocks are restored. And the trust funds. They're gone. Lila gasped, her face paling. Mom, you can't. I can. Eleanor snapped. And I have. You're my children. But you're not entitled to my life. Not anymore. The room fell silent, the weight of her words crushing. Thomas reached for her hand, but she pulled away. You'll have to earn my trust again, she said. If you can. That night, Eleanor stood on her balcony, the ocean roaring below. She felt lighter, as if the betrayal had been a tumor she'd finally excised. Her recovery wasn't just physical, it was a rebirth. She would rebuild her legacy, not for her children, but for herself. And if they wanted a place in it, they'd have to prove they were worthy. The days after the dinner were a storm of silence and tension. Eleanor's children left the mansion without a word, their faces a mix of shock and shame. The ocean's roar seemed to echo Eleanor's resolve as she stood firm in her decision. She had spent decades building a life for them, only to see them tear it apart while she fought for her life. Now, she was reclaiming her power, her legacy, and her heart. Marcus was the first to react. 2 days later, he called, his voice clipped and professional, as if he were negotiating a business deal. Mom, we need to talk. This escalation isn't fair. We were just planning for the future. You were sick. We didn't know you'd recover. Eleanor stood in her study, surrounded by shelves of leather-bound books and framed photos of her children as toddlers. She gripped the phone, her knuckles white, planning for the future. Marcus, you were looting my life while I was still in it. Don't insult me with excuses. He stammered, uncharacteristically flustered. I'll make it right. Just reinstate the trust funds. We can work this out. No, Eleanor said, her voice like ice. You'll have to work for your own future now. Like I did. She hung up before he could respond, her heart pounding with a mix of anger and liberation. Lila was next, arriving unannounced with a bouquet of Lily's Eleanor's favorite. A calculated move. She stood in the foyer, her designer heels clicking nervously on the marble floor. Mom, I'm so sorry, she said, her eyes glistening with practiced tears. I was scared. We all were. We thought we were losing you. And I wanted to protect what you'd built. Eleanor sat in her armchair, her posture regal despite the lingering weakness in her limbs. Protect it. Lila, you sold my stocks to fund your gallery. You didn't protect my legacy, you used it. Her voice softened, but only slightly. I raised you to be better than this. Lila's tears spilled over, but Eleanor saw the calculation behind them. I'll make it up to you, Lila promised. I'll rebuild the gallery in your name. Stop, Eleanor interrupted. I don't want promises. I want actions. Show me you're my daughter again, not just someone chasing my money. Thomas was the last to approach, his visit unassuming. He arrived on a rainy afternoon, his paint-splattered jacket dripping as he stood at the door. I didn't want any of it, he said quietly, his eyes avoiding hers. I told them it was wrong, but I didn't stop them. I'm sorry, Mom. Eleanor studied him, her youngest, the one who'd always carried her heart in his sketches. His guilt was genuine, but it wasn't enough. Sorry doesn't undo betrayal. Thomas, she said, you stood by while they carved up my life. That's not the son I raised. He nodded, his shoulders sagging. I know. I'll try to make it right. Not for the money. For you. Eleanor didn't respond. She let him leave, the rain blurring his figure as he walked away. Her heart ached, but she refused to soften. Not yet. As spring turned to summer, Eleanor threw herself into her recovery, both physical and emotional. She walked the cliffs near her estate daily, the salty air filling her lungs with life. She met with Margaret weekly, ensuring every legal loophole was closed, every asset secured. Her empire was hers again, but it felt different now. It wasn't just a legacy for her children. It was a testament to her own resilience. She began volunteering at the hospital where she'd been treated, sitting with patients who, like her, faced uncertain futures. She listened to their stories, shared her own, and found solace in their courage. One woman, Clara, a 75-year-old widow with no children, became a friend. You're stronger than you know, Clara told her one day, her voice raspy from her own illness. You didn't just survive cancer. You survived your family. Eleanor smiled, but the words stung. She had survived, but at what cost? Her children were still out there, grappling with the consequences of their actions. Marcus had thrown himself into his work, his calls becoming less frequent. Lila had pivoted, announcing a new gallery project inspired by Eleanor, though Eleanor saw it as another attempt to curry favor. Thomas sent sketches, quiet, heartfelt drawings of the ocean, of their old family home, but no words. Eleanor kept them in a drawer, unsure if she could forgive. One evening, as she sat in her study, Eleanor opened a letter from her lawyer. The final paperwork was complete. The trust funds were officially dissolved, the assets fully restored to her control. She felt a strange mix of triumph and grief. She had won, but she had lost the illusion of her children's loyalty. The question now was whether they could rebuild what they'd broken. She began to plan. Not for her death, as she once had, but for her life. She wanted to use her wealth for something bigger than herself, perhaps a foundation for cancer patients, or a scholarship for young women like she'd been, scrappy and determined. But her children lingered in her mind. Could they change? Could they earn her trust again? Or was the fracture too deep? As summer waned, Eleanor received an unexpected invitation. Marcus, Lila, and Thomas wanted to meet. Not at the mansion, but at a neutral Placia small cafe by the sea. They wanted to talk. They said, to make things right. Eleanor stared at the invitation, her heart torn between hope and skepticism. She had survived cancer. She had survived betrayal. But could she survive opening her heart to them again? The cafe was a quaint, weathered place. Its wooden tables kissed by salt air and its windows open to the Pacific's endless song. Eleanor arrived early, her silver hair tucked neatly under a scarf, her gray eyes scanning the horizon. She wore a simple navy dress, a stark contrast to the opulence her children were used to seeing. At 68, she carried herself with a quiet dignity, her recovery a badge of defiance against both cancer and betrayal. She chose a table by the window, her hand steady as she sipped chamomile tea, waiting for Marcus, Lila, and Thomas. They arrived together, an unusual sight. Marcus led, his suit impeccable but his face drawn, as if sleep had eluded him. Lila followed, her elegance subdued, her eyes darting nervously. Thomas trailed behind, clutching a sketchbook, his expression a mix of hope and dread. They sat, the air thick with unspoken words. Marcus spoke first, his voice measured. Mom, we've had time to think. What we did, it was a mistake. We were scared, and we acted selfishly. We want to fix this. Eleanor's gaze was unyielding. A mistake is forgetting a birthday. Marcus, you divided my life while I was fighting to live. That's not a mistake. That's a choice. Lila leaned forward, her voice trembling. We thought we were protecting your legacy. I know it sounds hollow now, but we were terrified of losing you. I didn't know how to handle it. Eleanor's lips tightened. You handled it by selling my stocks. Lila, by building your gallery on my pain. Don't dress it up as fear. Thomas cleared his throat, his voice soft. I didn't take anything, Mom. But I didn't stop them either. I should have. I was weak. He slid his sketchbook across the table. I drew this for you. Eleanor opened it to a pencil sketch of her, standing on the cliffs, her hair blowing in the wind. The lines captured her strength, her sorrow, her survival. She closed the book without a word, her heart aching. Thomas's gesture was genuine, but it wasn't enough to erase the past. I didn't come here to forgive you, Eleanor said, her voice steady but heavy with emotion. I came to hear you, to see if you understand what you've done. So far, I hear excuses. Marcus's jaw tightened. What do you want from us? The trust funds are gone. The assets are back in your name. We've lost everything you promised us. Isn't that punishment enough? Eleanor's eyes flashed. Punishment? Marcus, I didn't erase the trust funds to punish you. I did it to protect myself. You showed me who you are. I had to make sure my legacy stayed mine. The table fell silent, the crash of waves outside filling the void. Lila wiped her eyes, her composure cracking. I don't know how to fix this, she whispered. I don't know how to be your daughter again. Then learn, Eleanor said, her voice softening but firm. I'm not closing the door on you, but I'm not opening it wide either. You have to earn your way back. The meeting ended without resolution, but it planted a seed. Eleanor returned to her mansion, her mind racing. She didn't want to shut her children out forever, but she couldn't trust them blindly again. She needed proof, not words, but actions that they valued her, not just her wealth. Over the next weeks, Eleanor threw herself into a new project, a foundation for cancer patients, named Clara's Hope after her hospital friend, who had passed away that summer. The foundation would fund treatment, counseling, and research, a legacy that felt truer to her heart than the trust funds ever had. She worked tirelessly, meeting with philanthropists, doctors, and survivors, her energy fueled by a purpose she hadn't felt in years. Her children, meanwhile, began to show signs of change, however small. Marcus stopped calling with demands and instead sent a letter, offering to volunteer his business expertise for the foundation. "No strings," he wrote. "I just want to help." Eleanor read it skeptically but didn't respond. Lila closed her gallery temporarily, announcing she was auditing its finances to repay the stocks she'd sold. Thomas began visiting the hospital, sketching portraits for patients, his quiet presence a comfort to those in pain. Eleanor watched from a distance, her heart torn. She wanted to believe in their redemption, but the wound was still raw. One evening, as she walked the cliffs, she thought of her own mother, a woman who'd raised her alone through poverty and hardship. "Forgiveness isn't weakness," her mother had once said, "but it's not free either." Eleanor wasn't ready to forgive, but she was ready to watch, to wait, to see if her children could become the people she'd raised them to be. By autumn, Clara's Hope was gaining traction, its first fundraiser a modest success. Eleanor stood at the podium, her voice clear and strong, sharing her story of survival not just from cancer, but from betrayal. The crowd listened, moved by her resilience. In the back, she saw Thomas, sketching her speech. Marcus and Lila weren't there, but she hadn't expected them to be. Change, she knew, would take time. That night, alone in her study, Eleanor opened Thomas's sketchbook again. The drawing of her on the cliffs was joined by a new one, her at the podium, her face alight with purpose. A note was tucked inside. "I'm trying, Mom. I hope you see it." She closed the book, her eyes stinging. Maybe, just maybe, there was hope for them yet. Autumn painted the cliffs in hues of amber and gold, mirroring the cautious hope growing in Eleanor's heart. She was 69 now, her body stronger but still marked by the scars of her battle with cancer. Her silver hair was fuller, framing a face that carried both wisdom and wariness. Clara's Hope had become her lifeline, a purpose that filled the void left by her children's betrayal. Yet their recent efforts, Marcus's offer to help, Lila's financial amends, Thomas's quiet support lingered in her mind, stirring a fragile question: could they rebuild what they'd broken? Marcus was the first to take a tangible step. He arrived at the mansion one crisp morning, a thick binder under his arm. "I've drafted a business plan for Clara's Hope," he said, his usual confidence tempered by humility. "Pro bono. It's projections, partnerships, sustainability models. I know I don't deserve your trust, but I want to earn it." Eleanor took the binder, her expression unreadable. "I'll review it," she said coolly. "But don't expect praise for doing what's right." Marcus nodded, his eyes meeting hers for the first time in months, and left without another word. The plan was meticulous, a testament to Marcus's skill. It proposed corporate sponsorships, grant applications, and a scalable model to expand the foundation's reach. Eleanor read it late into the night, her skepticism warring with a flicker of pride. Marcus was trying not for money, but for her. Still, she didn't call him trust. She reminded herself. wasn't rebuilt in a day. Lila's efforts were less structured, but no less significant. She sent a check, the exact amount of the stocks she'd liquidated. With a letter, "I sold the gallery's assets to make this right. I'm starting over, Mom, and I want to do it honestly." Eleanor deposited the check into the foundation, not her personal account. She wrote back, brief but firm, "This is a start. Keep going." Lila's response was a quiet one. She began volunteering at the hospital, reading to patients. Her charm softened into something genuine. Thomas's path was the most personal. He continued his hospital visits. His sketch is now a staple in the oncology ward. Patients spoke of him with warmth, his quiet presence a balm. One day, he left a new sketch on Eleanor's doorstep, the three of them, Marcus, Lila, and himself as children, playing in the garden of their old home. A note read, "I miss us." Eleanor traced the lines with her finger, her throat tight. She didn't invite him in, but she kept the sketch on her desk. As winter approached, Eleanor's work with Clara's hope intensified. The foundation secured its first major grant, enough to fund a new counseling program for families of cancer patients. Eleanor thought of her own family, fractured but not irreparable. She began to see her children's actions not as redemption, but as steps toward it. They were trying, and she was watching, her heart caught between hope and caution. One snowy evening, Eleanor hosted a small event for the foundation at her mansion. Donors, doctors, and survivors filled the ballroom, their chatter mingling with soft music. To her surprise, all three children attended. Marcus mingled with donors, pitching the foundation with genuine passion. Lila helped organize the silent auction, her smile warm as she spoke to guests. Thomas presented a series of sketches, donated for the auction, each capturing the resilience of the patients he'd met. Eleanor watched from the sidelines, her heart a battlefield. They were here, contributing. But was it enough? As the evening wound down, Marcus approached her. "Mom, I know we've got a long way to go, but I'm in this for you, for the foundation. No ulterior motives." Lila joined them, her eyes earnest. "I'm learning, Mom. I want to be someone you're proud of again." Thomas stood beside them, silent but present, his sketchbook tucked under his arm. Eleanor looked at them, her children, and felt a crack in the wall she'd built around her heart. "You've taken steps," she said, her voice steady but softer. "But trust is earned over time. Keep showing me who you are." They nodded, the weight of her words settling over them. As the guests left, Eleanor stood alone in the ballroom, the chandeliers casting soft light on the sketches Thomas had donated. One caught her eye, a portrait of her, smiling, surrounded by faceless figures, her children, perhaps, waiting to be defined by their actions. That night, Eleanor wrote in her journal, a habit she'd started during her illness. "They're trying," she wrote, "and I'm watching. Maybe there's hope for us yet. But it's their move now." She closed the journal, her heart lighter but still guarded, and looked out at the snow falling over the Pacific. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in years, she felt ready to face it alone or with her children, depending on the paths they chose. Winter blanketed the coast in a quiet hush, mirroring the tentative peace settling over Eleanor's life. At 69, she was a force reborn, her silver hair a crown of survival, her gray eyes sharp with purpose. Clara's hope was thriving, its programs now supporting dozens of patients and their families. Eleanor poured her energy into it, finding meaning in helping others navigate the fear and uncertainty she'd faced. Yet her children remained a constant undercurrent in her thoughts, their efforts to rebuild trust a slow, uneven dance. Marcus's work with the foundation had become a steady presence. He attended board meetings, his business acumen sharpening their strategy. He no longer spoke of the trust funds or the assets he'd once tried to claim. Instead, he asked Eleanor about her vision, her goals, listening in a way he never had before. One afternoon, as they reviewed budgets in her study, he paused. "Mom, I know I failed you. I'm not asking for forgiveness yet. Just a chance to keep proving myself." Eleanor studied him, seeing not the polished businessman, but the boy who'd once clung to her after nightmares. "You're proving something," she said, her tone neutral. "Keep going." It wasn't warmth, but it was an opening, and Marcus took it with a nod. Lila's transformation was quieter, but no less profound. She'd sold her gallery entirely, using the proceeds to fund a new wing for Clara's Hopius space for art therapy, inspired by the patients she'd met. She worked alongside counselors, her charm now a tool for healing rather than manipulation. One evening, she stayed late at the hospital, helping a young girl paint through her fear. Eleanor, visiting to drop off supplies, watched from the doorway. Lila's laughter, genuine and unforced, stirred something in her. "You're good at this," Eleanor said later, her voice soft. Lila's eyes filled with tears. "I'm trying to be," she whispered. Thomas's efforts were the most personal, his sketches a bridge between him and Eleanor. He'd created a series for the foundation, Faces of Hope, capturing the resilience of patients. The portraits hung in the hospital, each accompanied by a patient's story. At a small unveiling, Thomas stood nervously as Eleanor spoke to the crowd. "These sketches remind us that strength comes in many forms," she said, her eyes meeting his. Afterward, he approached her. "I don't expect you to trust me yet," he said, "but I'm here. For you." Eleanor didn't respond, but she kept his latest sketch, a portrait of her laughing in her mantle. As spring bloomed, Eleanor faced a new challenge, her health. A routine scan showed a shadow. Not cancer, but a reminder of her fragility. Dr. Patel reassured her it was benign, but the scare shook her. She sat on her balcony, the ocean's rhythm steadying her, and thought of her legacy. Clara's hope was secure, but her children were still a question mark. Could they carry her values forward? Not just her wealth. She decided to test them. She invited them to the mansion for a meeting, framing it as a discussion about the foundation's future. They arrived, wary but eager, sensing a shift. Eleanor stood at the head of the table, her presence commanding. "Clara's hope is my legacy now," she began. "But I'm not immortal. I need to know if you can carry it forward, not for money, but for what it means." She outlined a proposal, a new initiative to fund research for rare cancers, requiring dedication and sacrifice. "I'm not asking you to run it," she said. "I'm asking you to prove you understand what I've built and why." She assigned each a role: Marcus to secure funding, Lila to engage communities, Thomas to document the journey through art. "This isn't about trust funds," she said. "It's about trust." They accepted, their faces a mix of determination and fear. Over the next months, Eleanor watched them work. Marcus negotiated with pharmaceutical companies, his ambition channeled into purpose. Lila organized support groups, her empathy deepening with each story. Thomas's art became a voice for the voiceless, his sketches raising awareness. They weren't perfect. Marcus pushed too hard. Lila faltered under pressure. Thomas withdrew when overwhelmed, but they were trying. One evening, Eleanor found a letter slipped under her door. It was from all three, handwritten, a rarity in their digital world. "We know we broke your trust," it read. "We're not asking for it back. We're asking for a chance to build something new with you. Enclosed was a photo of them as children, laughing in the garden. A mirror of Thomas's sketch. Eleanor held the photo, her eyes stinging. She wasn't ready to forgive fully, but she was ready to let them try. She placed the photo beside Thomas's sketch, a small step toward healing. The ocean roared outside, a reminder that life, like the tide, could erode or rebuild, depending on the choices made. Spring unfolded in a burst of color, the cliffs alive with wildflowers as Eleanor Grayson, now 70, stood at the helm of Clara's Hope. Her recovery was a miracle, her silver hair a testament to her resilience. Her gray eyes softened but still sharp. The foundation had grown, its programs a lifeline for countless patients. Yet the true test of her legacy lay with her children Marcus, Lila, and Thomas, who were navigating the roles she'd given them, their efforts a fragile bridge over the chasm of their betrayal. Marcus had secured a major grant for the Rare Cancer Research Initiative, his negotiations fierce but fair. He worked late, often calling Eleanor to discuss strategy, not as a son seeking approval, but as a partner respecting her vision. "This matters," he told her one night, his voice earnest. "Not just for you, but for me. I want to be part of something bigger." Eleanor nodded, her heart warming but guarded. He was proving himself, step by step. Lila's community outreach had blossomed. She'd built a network of support groups, her charm now a tool for connection rather than manipulation. At a fundraiser, she spoke passionately about the patients she'd met, her voice breaking as she shared their stories. Eleanor, in the audience, saw not the daughter who'd sold her stocks, but a woman finding her purpose. Afterward, Lila approached her. "I'm not who I was," she said. "I hope you see that." Eleanor squeezed her hand. A small gesture, but a significant one. Thomas's art had become the heart of the initiative. His Faces of Hope series was now a traveling exhibit, raising funds and awareness. He spent hours with patients, listening, sketching, capturing their resilience. At one exhibit, he unveiled a new piece, Eleanor, standing on the cliffs, surrounded by faint outlines of her children, their faces still forming. "You're our anchor," he told her, his voice thick. "I'm trying to be worthy of that." Eleanor's throat tightened, but she only nodded, her emotions too raw for words. As summer neared, Eleanor faced a decision. Her health was stable, but the scare from winter lingered. She met with Margaret, her lawyer, to discuss her will. "I'm not reinstating the trust funds," Eleanor said firmly. "But I want to leave something for them, not money, but a chance." She outlined a new plan. Upon her death, her children would inherit roles in Clara's Hope, not as owners, but as stewards, tasked with carrying it forward. "If they've earned it," she added. Margaret raised an eyebrow. "You're giving them a legacy, but not a fortune. That's bold." "It's not about punishing them," Eleanor said. "It's about teaching them what matters." The final test came unexpectedly. A major donor pulled out, threatening the research initiative. Eleanor called a family meeting, her children gathering in her study. "We need to save this," she said. "Not for me, but for the people who need it. What do you propose?" Marcus suggested a bold pitch to a new donor, offering his own contacts. Lila proposed a grassroots campaign, leveraging the community she'd built. Thomas offered to create a new art series to draw attention. They worked together, their ideas meshing in a way they never had before. Eleanor watched, her heart swelling. They weren't just her children, they were becoming her partners. The campaign succeeded. The initiative saved. At a celebration, Eleanor stood before a crowd, her children at her side. Clara's Hope is about second chances, she said, her voice steady. For patients. For families. For all of us. She glanced at Marcus, Lila, and Thomas, her eyes softening. I've seen what second chances can do. That night, Eleanor invited them to the balcony, the ocean a symphony below. I'm proud of what you've done, she said, her voice quiet but clear. You've shown me who you can be. I'm not erasing the past, but I'm ready to build a future with you if you keep earning it. Marcus nodded, his eyes bright. Lila hugged her, tears falling freely. Thomas handed her a new sketch, the four of them, standing together, the cliffs behind them. We're trying, Mom, he said. We won't stop. Eleanor took the sketch, her heart full. She had survived cancer, betrayal, and despair. Now, she was rebuilding not just her legacy, but her family. The ocean roared, a reminder of life's relentless tides. But Eleanor stood firm, her children beside her. Their journey far from over, but finally on the right path.